Now, our first guests for the show are Sarah Kyle and Kelly Stranberg with LA3 Solutions. Hi, Kelly and Sarah. How are you doing?
Good. Hi.
Good.
Michael, nice to meet you.
Listen, thank you so much. In our preliminary interview, we do this with all of our guests, but I had a chance to get to know a little bit of Sarah and Kelly. But I got to know even more in regards of them based on the referrals that they gave for other potential guests for the show. It was incredible because having been in this industry for such a long time, connecting with new innovators, seeing what they were doing, it was a great reflection of the quality of assessment that both of you have, and that really spoke that spoke very highly of what you're doing and your advisement. But I'd like to give the stage to you without me giving your bio. Please tell us more about LA3 Solutions.
Sure. Thanks, Michael. Just a quick note of who we are and what we do. LA3 Solutions is what we consider a strategic advising um, company, consulting firm. It kind of runs the gamut, but what we've done is Kelly and I both spent the last 13 plus years in senior living of all facets, all levels of care, all organizational sizes and types, running, programming, resident engagement, resident experience, kind of whatever you want to quantify or define that as. We've taken those 26 years of combined experiences, a lot of things that we did wrong, things we would do different now, and working with different partners in the space to elevate this overall idea of what is engagement and how do people spend their time and what matters.
I think that's wonderful. It's interesting because you're right. It is constantly evolving. So technically, everything that worked 5 years ago, is not going to potentially work, now. And that's one thing we always experienced, not just from a marketing level, but even from a care perspective. I mean, regulations based on state, can change a lot of the dynamics within senior living communities, and so that's great that you're at the forefront of that. Now, when you approach a community, so I'm a senior living community, and we need help with just a structure of what we're doing from an outreach perspective, and then on the other side from a care perspective. So how would you approach us in looking at that situation?
We really start with, does that community or does that organization have a philosophy around the resident engagement or resident experience piece? Sarah and I always like to start there. This is a critical piece of why there is value to communal living and senior living, but we noted it even further or in a greater sense this past year due to COVID-19. And it's surprising to Sarah and I the frequency at which we work with senior living operators, and operators have a tendency to think it's the actual programs. And Sarah and I look at it in a much larger, more global strategic manner of, have you taken the time to define what that is? And then all of these different things then feed up into that philosophy of what is experience or what is resident engagement. And there could be an outreach piece, and there is a family piece, and there is the programming piece, and there is the relational piece. And then how do you measure that or assess all of that to ensure that there's a level of success that meets organizational KPIs to ensure we are going in the right direction with that piece of the business, just like you would look at clinical
That's
dining,
great. Yeah,
etc.
so basically, laying out what's there, looking at the foundation, and figuring out what is needed from that process. That's great. Now, asking how long does that, from the consulting, when you first have that initial inquiry meeting, to when the process starts to begin? Does it differ from community to community, based on size, structure, things of that nature, or is it pretty cut and dry?
Great question. One thing, we're just on kind of a year of being an organization and doing quite a few projects. And the urgency at which the person that or the organization that has used us to move something really determines that. The people that have it down and are ready to go, we can move fast. What we like to do is look at data or look at some type of siloed information. What we find is different departments have different information about this experience. And so how do we compile that and pull it together? As quickly as people can give it to us, we can move fairly fast. The one thing we like to go and look at as well is what's the story that's already been put out there?
Yeah.
What are you selling? What's on the website? What's on the copy on your collateral that's going out? And from that, we can take some of those analytics, take that story, and really determine at what speed we want to move. It's all about how quickly or how much disruption, good disruption, that an organization can work through in order to move
That's
forward.
fantastic. Yeah, I really like that you're communicating a little bit about the online messaging and presence of that. That's something I've looked at it quite aggressively, and it's been a unique evolution through the years. When I first started in senior living 18 years ago, online messaging was at least in the areas that we were in, 38 to 48% max of people under the age of 65 had any access or understanding of the computer. Now, of course, it's evolved significantly. I mean, it's twice that for people above the age of 65. So is that something that I guess even as a new organization, do you find it difficult communicating to senior living communities the importance of the online messaging? And that goes into so many factors. But just kind of the idea of saying like, hey, your website, as much as you want to communicate, with the community, as much as your outreach, because I think it is incredibly underrated how much of an effort senior living communities make in community outreach alone. They alone, I believe, those efforts over the last 10 years has really removed a lot of the stigma that existed in assuming all senior livings were nursing homes that, and were, cages and all these terrible things. Now, granted, new regulations have helped. But are you seeing now in your meetings, though, kind of more of a focus on this online messaging? Because the community outreach is fantastic. But with the pandemic coming in, the way it did, I think it did get a lot of senior living communities to, start looking at the fact that, hey, listen, your first point of contact is probably going to be your website. So what's on it and what it says about you is important. Now, is that something that you're seeing?
Absolutely. And I think more providers and organizations are really diving deep into the user experience of their website and what is the messaging. It's one of the first points or entry points Sara and I will dive into when working with somebody to understand, here's what your website says and here's what we're unearthing. And do they mirror or are they completely disconnected?
Yeah.
I think sometimes because traditionally in senior living industry, we don't always have those website designers on staff and people that have the expertise. So we outsource it, which is nothing wrong with that. But when you outsource it, there's some work being done that is not aware of what true life in a community is like for residents, for staff, for families.
Yeah.
And so sometimes there's a significant disconnect. I do think people are paying more attention to that, as well as not just their website, their social media presence. And I think the other thing Sara and I are hearing a good deal about, and we are very supportive of, is why are you not using your own residents and staff?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's, as long as your residents are signing off that, yes, you can use my likeness or my image, use your own folks, because Sara and I say all the time, like, God bless some of the people that are in the stock photography files that exist out there. But when you go to 20 or 30 senior living operator pages and you're like, hey, there's that person again. Hey, there's that person again. We pay attention and we note that, and maybe somebody doing research in a marketplace won't, but we start to notice it and it loses some authenticity.
Yeah.
And what are we trying to really rebuild right now as an industry as we come out of COVID, I'll say, is transparency and rebuilding trust, and that it's actually a healthy and safe option for living for yourself or a loved one. But how do we do that? We need to be real. And by using stock photography of like that pretty fit, healthy older adult, that's not reality. And we need to be willing to be real and show those images. Sarah, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. We do joke that there's about 5 people that have been around for the last 10 years, and they're on everything.
Well, to my next question, because I'm excited to hear what you have to say in regards to this. I have learned recently, I think, and specifically it was getting into the tech world, of senior living. In the past I'd done the respite to prevent hospital readmission case studies and things like that, but that was very nit and gritty, healthcare algorithms, not really necessarily tech, just finding ways to kind of do things more efficiently. But in regards to tech, I've definitely experienced this. How do you engage and capture the importance? Because I explain this a lot to people when they were talking, whether it's about certain tech services and things like that. I said, there's so much on the average administrator's plate. I mean, there's so much every single day. There's residents knocking on their door, and not always complaining, but just sometimes to say hi. And sometimes that hi is incredibly important, being from a psychological perspective, because that person wants to know, that person taking care of them is there and smiling back, things like that. But there's so many other factors. We talk about, the resident care wing, and, potentially, states can come in. I mean, when I go through importance for the average senior living, manager, or, maybe even in some cases executive, I even look at it and say, well, even solutions that maybe could work aren't necessarily going to make that top 5 or top 10, things to do. I feel like that might be something that you kind of face when you look at it from an organizational perspective, if just sustaining the importance and, and emphasizing that when you're dealing with a client that really has a lot more things that, on paper are more, you feel like more immediate importance, and that's so that's
Find
my
ourselves
question.
undoing a lot when we go into work with a client. And what we see is that because that philosophy wasn't defined prior to making large business decisions or annual contracts with resident tech or programming, that they don't necessarily fit together. And so they are being used. There's a lot of tech, there's a lot of solutions that are being used to engage residents, but we don't know what outcome we're looking for, nor can we justify if it's been successful, if it has an ROI, if it needs to be extended. So first is, what is our philosophy? For instance, if our philosophy is everyone here matters, every individual matters. Well, that philosophy to me tells me that Betty Smith, who lives in your community, hands down, everything about her, right? And because you know everything about her, you can fit these needs, you can meet these needs, and you can engage her how she wants to be engaged, whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
Well, if we don't have any technology to tell us who Betty Smith is from a psychosocial, not her care needs or not her qualifying needs of a CRM, that she has this diagnosis and she can afford this, then our philosophy doesn't stand true. And so backing up and going a little bit opposite way of what you think we would do and say, in order for this philosophy to ring true, you need different tech, or you need to put your dollars towards a different story rather than saying, for instance, we have VR over here. Well, why do you have VR? Right.
Yeah. That
So
makes sense. That
again,
makes a lot of sense.
the philosophy has to be established to know what tools and resources and what tech you need in order to show that your philosophy is being carried out and is successful and there's
I love
outcomes
that.
behind it.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's important, because I think because of those, because there's a lot of necessary distraction, I call it, in senior living, for the average person, working in senior living, there's a lot of things that are, more pertinent. We do see a lot of times where there's services, specifically with tech, and that happens with almost any industry as new tech starts to come in, they start to evolve out of the old. But when it comes to tech, it's like, well, I got a guy. We have a guy, does the VR. We have a guy who does this, and it's like, It's usually the the cousin or or the great grandson of a resident or something of that nature. It's shocking, but at the same time, I think that's fascinating. I think on all aspects, both of what you do, not just your passion and your approach, but the fact that you were seeing consulting groups out there start to not just work with senior living communities, but to in a lot of ways setting a standard, and to be able to like I said, what I learned the most from both of you was connecting with the people that you had recommended. Have 20 years, in senior living, you start to know what works, and what is tech that might not. And I thought that everyone we interviewed and everyone on our show is going to see. We have Matt Golden next, and we have a few others after. So you'll be able to see what they're doing. And sometimes it's the most simple and subtle, subtlest thing that can have such a major impact on so many different factors. And Matt's is obviously a lot more extensive, so we'll let him explain. But then our next guest, it's simple, it's subtle, it meets the psychological needs of, for residents and things of that nature. So it says a lot about both of you and what you're doing. And just thank you for coming on the show and providing us with this information. We really appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share.
Our pleasure.
Yeah, of course.
Next guest, we have CEO and co-founder of MapHabit, Mr. Matt Golden, who's here to talk about his new senior living app that's being utilized in senior living communities across the country. How you doing, Matt?
Great. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Thank you for coming on the show. Looking forward to learning more, and you please feel free to tell our audience what MapHabit is and why you created it.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I started MapHabit with a friend of mine who lives down the street from me, a neuroscientist named Dr. Stuart Zola. We both have had personal family connections to dementia. For myself, my grandma had Lewy body dementia very early on, and my uncle, who was a huge mentor in my life, unfortunately was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's in his late 50s. And that was the one experience that really had the biggest impact on me. He got me my first computer. He taught me really how to be an entrepreneur and really have patience when working with older adults. And unfortunately, I got to see really the changes between my relationship with him as the disease progressed, and really the struggles that he had with staying independent and just doing all of the daily routines that we all do, and we kind of take for granted. When you unfortunately have these neurodegenerative conditions, you lose the ability to kind of structure things in a methodical order, whether it be getting dressed, making coffee, taking your medication or vitamins, just really kind of the morning and evening routines that we do have the benefit of caregivers, to help us along the way. But, that was really pronounced with my uncle. So that's really what drives me on a day-to-day basis, both my personal connections and my co-founder, Dr. Zola. So in March 2018, we started MapHabit. We've had a foundation on clinical research, really having claims and evidence to back up all of the great improvements with independence and quality of life, and really simplifying the day for caregivers, making it a lot more straightforward, increasing their productivity through the efficiency gains of mapping out different tasks, and even what I'll show you in a minute, our newly acquired daily STIM program that really is phenomenal for visiting families to have really meaningful things to do with their loved ones, or also for the really busy lifestyle activity directors that are struggling with creating innovative, fun curriculum. We provide that for you on a monthly basis.
That's incredible, and I think a lot of our members in the senior living community are going to see, some of the stuff that I was able to see in our preliminary interview. Specifically, I know what you're addressing is ADLs. ADLs can fluctuate within a senior living community, not just in cases with memory care. Of course, there's a completely different approach, but with the same concept and same idea, to try to identify what are these, normal, daily living activities, and to try to sustain some type of consistency. That can get very difficult in the transition with memory care. But at the same time, what I thought so fascinating, and I can't wait for everyone to see it. I know you're going to show us and walk us through, but just how this app creates that sense of sustainability that can be so difficult to try to follow, as a resident care aide or a director of nursing, to try to sustain that consistency, especially when residents need that sense of connecting with a loved one and things that were routine. I think this app does an amazing job of doing that. But I'm going to let the senior living community find out for themselves.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, I'll just give you a quick couple of visuals to really put in perspective on really how MapHabit does help some of the struggles that we're all seeing today. In the COVID / post-COVID world, we are still dealing with increased costs for care. The retention rate is still a big challenge with turnover upwards of 50% in a lot of the markets. Families are demanding a lot more transparency, and they really do want to know that their loved one is being engaged, and to really understand what activities that they're benefiting from the wonderful communities that there are. And obviously leadership is looking for ways to increase occupancy. That's not only right now, but that's going to be a trend going forward. So MapHabit can help in a lot of those areas. So some of them, with care coordination, we'll start off with that, but MapHabit really does help with also the cognitive engagement side and the dementia education. Our core platform is an app that is used by caregivers. It's used by residents who may be independent or assisted, who still have a lot of the abilities to live independently, but they may just need a little bit more assistance for reminders when to do certain things, or when activities are starting, or even to stay independent in their rooms, etc. So here's an example of just a simple video that shows before you leave the house or after you leave your residence, what should you be doing? It's very visual, as you can see. We have just when things start, when things are going to end. These are personalized for all the community, and it's also personalized for voice.
Turn off your phone so there's no distractions.
So think about, your caregiving staff and being able to then record audio from a family member. It really does personalize the experience, and we really do make it simple and rely on pictures and video, just what's happening now, what's coming up next. And we really do believe in celebrating all the people in our loved one's life, whether it be, people that work within the communities themselves, other family members, people that come in as visitors. It really does help make it very special and personalized. So we think that this, we know that this is helping residents, it's helping care staff, it's helping, increase the satisfaction of family members as well.
That's great.
Another really cool part about MapHabit is the Daily Stim program. This is a 3-part program that focuses on cognitive stimulation. There's basically a mix of mental acuity games and hands-on puzzles and cognitive activities you can do. There's forms of stress reduction with different seated stretches that can really ease some of the physical and mental tensions that we have. So you see here some, exercises that can be done on a one-on-one setting. They can be put on the big screen if you can cast this through, AirPlay or Chromecast.
Sit up as straight as possible. Stretch
Now,
both arms
Matt,
above
to
your
interrupt
head.
you for a second on this reminds me of a
Hold
portion
the
in our
pose
preliminary
for a count
call
of 5.
where I thought that this was such a fascinating concept. I guess I'm going to roll back a little bit when you cover the daily living activities. You're right. It's not always a family member. Sometimes because, the reality is, the resident care aides and nurses, they cannot work 24/7. So they're not always on that particular shift. And in some cases, not just in memory care, but in senior living, hearing that voice of the resident care aide or nurse or even member of the staff that particular resident trusts can be a really welcoming and wonderful experience. Hearing it from a family member can have just as much impact, if not more. So I think that's wonderful. And then going to this in particular, which I think was great, as I pointed out, there is such a unique relationship with the preferred partners and the providers from senior living to skilled nursing facility. Specifically on our last show, we had Mr. Lane Bowen, and he actually introduced a concept 35 years ago of physical therapy working within senior living, within long-term care facilities like skilled nursing facilities, because residents would leave a senior living or they would come from home to the hospital. They would go into a skilled nursing facility, and they would, they would not have that physical therapy there, that opportunity to progress. What I noticed in my time in senior living is following these residents as they went through the process to see the impact of the physical therapist. Not all senior living communities have physical therapy that's within the community. They'll utilize home health agencies and companies like that who will bring in therapy, PT groups, etc. And it's beneficial. But at the same time, I think this is an excellent opportunity for senior living communities and the therapy groups within the skilled nursing facilities to be able to follow that kind of continuum of care. What worked in the facility, what were they doing there? I mean, that's something that's valuable information for an activities director, for resident care aides and staff, and at the same time, even being able to hear the therapist who was at that skilled facility working with that resident through a very difficult time, to be able to hear their voice, their compassion. I think it's an excellent opportunity for the facilities and senior living communities to expand their continuity of care. That was just a really long compliment. So I think it's fascinating. So anyway, continue.
Sure. Yeah. No, you hit the nail on the head. You really want to provide tools that are easy to use, that can really help increase satisfaction and really decrease the amount of in-person staff that you may need on an ongoing basis, and provide the best overall experience. That's really what we're going for. So just to kind of complete some of the information here, take a listen to this one too.
Name something in your environment that you are or have been thankful for.
So every day you get a different set of maps with different questions that are, provocative. They really help stimulate conversation, and they're all out of the box. So you don't have to do anything for this. You really just open up your app and hit play.
Pick up half of the rubber bands with each hand.
So we provide a kit that can be used by staff as well. I'm not sure if you can see my screen, but each month we provide you a new kit of different supplies, and you can you can either have this in bulk for all your residents within the neighborhood or within the community, or we can send them to individual apartments and residents themselves, so that the care staff or the activity directors can work with them one-on-one. Or, as I mentioned, when family members come in, they'll have access to the login on the app, and they can now have something really meaningful and cognitively improving the individual's trajectory by utilizing some of these programs. So we knew that there was a gap in some of these areas, so that's what we're trying to fill, is really helping with engaging content that can really prolong someone's independence and happiness.
It's interesting with a lot of a lot of the technology that comes forward, specifically senior living, which is healthcare in general though related, but specifically with senior living. Sometimes, I mean, it's very effective. It can also be very tech heavy. I have to, again, extend my compliments. As someone who's been doing this for nearly 2 decades, it's exciting to see technological innovation have this sense of interaction and something that is not just designed to retain data, which is incredibly important, but the interactive tool, and I think just the broad spectrum of what this particular application covers, it's incredibly impressive. And I love that you guys send in the care packets, because I think a lot of people who are seeing this would understand. Yeah, I mean, this is, Daily STEM Interactive is something that senior living communities do a lot, not just in the memory care again, but throughout the senior living. I think it's great to see this application taking part of that and even potentially expanding it and improving it. So that's wonderful. That's really wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah, there's one other part of our program I wanted to highlight, and that is our Live Well Dementia training. This is a really cool program from Lynn Possell, who has really spent about 30 years as a certified dementia trainer. She has this curriculum that really helps with a quarterly assessment of just helping caregivers understand how to best provide individualized care support for their residents. It basically will break down some aspects of the life history of the resident, what their current abilities are, what are some things that they have lost that maybe through practice and through using the procedural memory of what MapHabit is best known for, it's muscle memory of the brain, that you actually can relearn or learn new concepts given the right instruction. So this is actually a really unique offering that we have this in a technology package. And I'll just show you just a quick, one map for a wellness plan. It really does, will show you, how you can structure providing medications to people in a rational way, but also the wellness plan, as I mentioned, breaking down these specific abilities for the individual, understanding their environment, understanding the flow of the day. Are they a morning person or do they have sundowning issues? Having all that as part of the care plan and having these visual step-by-step guides that are individualized or could be in general for providing the best support when you have to bring in agency who's brand new, really having this in addition to daily stim, in addition to some of those therapeutic rehab and just ways to move forward.
Absolutely, it's a consistency. It's a foundation of approach, and one senior living community could potentially have 3 to 5, even more sometimes, home health and hospice providers and physical therapy groups. So it is important to keep everybody on the same page, and that pertains actually to my next question in relation to this. For the training, the learning curve with senior living, there's so much adaptation that has to happen with almost any new program or things of that nature. State regulations can change a lot of the scope of things. Now, this, introduced to a community, how does the training process go? What's the timeline for the learning curve? How seamless is the process of getting a community integrated into the MapHabit application?
So, yeah, to implement MapHabit, it's actually 5 simple steps. And you can see this on the screen here. So first is we'll give you a daily stim kit that you can use with your activity directors, with the residents in any particular neighborhood. A lot of the times we start with memory care, but as you mentioned earlier, really is useful for all neighborhoods, because even in assisted and independent, you have various family members that visit, and it can be really fun to do with the whole family. After we start with the daily sim kit, we have what are called marketing kits. These are really useful for your community relations directors who you maybe have a prospective resident that wants to move in, but they're not ready either for personal or financial reasons. A nice benefit you can give them is these kits that they can then use in their home, and it really does get them ready for entering into the community. It's a nice benefit that may actually get them to go from a maybe to a yes. So I think that's something that's really powerful. The next part of the phase, which is about a month and a half in, is we'll actually help you build your initial visual maps. So these are really what we call power user maps, where we'll have different aspects of the community that we can highlight, a short video of the executive director or maybe the wellness services director for that community, just talking about what they feel is the most impactful and important parts of why this community is special. And then we will help you. You can take a couple of pictures and we'll build you your first couple of maps so that they can be used for all the residents. So we really do try to make it as easy as possible. The next phase is the dementia training. As I mentioned, there's a lot of individualized care that you have to give for someone maybe who's early stage versus middle, even within the different types of dementia. There are certain techniques that really can be used to give the best individualized care. And we have, through Lynn Posso's Live Well Dementia Training, that everything covered there. So that's really useful for your care team. And then finally, we have these wellness reviews, like I showed you before, for the residents that you want to utilize the dementia training for in a more specific way on a quarterly basis. It's a great way to link to their care plan. We're linked with Point Click Care, by the way, but the care plan really does change over time, and certainly as the needs of the resident change, then you really need to adjust the support that you give them. So on a quarterly basis, we help you reassess and provide you access to the training and the maps that will best support that resident. So those are the 5 steps, and it's turned out to be really a fun and great experience for all our communities.
That's fantastic. And what is, just from your experience, kind of I guess to kind of reemphasize this, you probably addressed this too in what you just said, but kind of like the timeline. I know, senior living works a lot in numbers, but in your experience with the senior living communities and, in the different states that you've worked in, how long does it take for staff, to adapt, it seems very compatible once it starts. But like with any program, senior living is constantly training and the staff is constantly training. What do you see as like the timeline between, implementing the application, from getting the application, learning it, and then implementation that you see?
It's out of the box, so there's no customization needed. We will mail you the kits for the number of residents that you're going to start with in your communities. So within the first week, you can get value out of MapHabit. Again, within that 2 to 4 weeks, we'll have the marketing kits that you can then give to your prospects. And then these individualized maps for the community, that's after about a month. And that takes us about a week to build those. And then you can incorporate that in part of your lease up and sales process. So in as little as 6 total weeks, you're totally up and going. And for the first part of it, there's no personalization or customization needed. And we really do handhold you throughout the process. So the amount of impact and time and investment of your staff is minimal up front. But certainly as you want to get more value out of it, especially with those wellness plans and the dementia specific training, then once you're in months 2 and 3, if you choose to roll into those programs, then there would be some additional time required. But really early on, you'll see that you really will get a lot of benefit.
I think that's fantastic. I'd like to also learn, before we end this segment, I'd like to learn about the clinical research. We talked a lot about that as well in our previous episode. What was the clinical research that went into this to be able to provide value for what you guys are doing in your application?
Yeah, thank you. Well, evidence-based research is part of the fabric of our company. It always has been and always will be. We are fortunate to have been named the first place winner in the National Institute of Aging's Dementia Care Coordination Challenge in 2019, and we are a recipient of a NIH SBIR award that will really carry us through the next couple of years. What the NIH and a lot of scientists really like the best about MapHabit is our use of procedural memory. Procedural memory, it sounds complicated, but it really isn't. It's just the muscle memory of the brain. So you have 2 types of memory systems. The one that gets affected by Alzheimer's disease, that's, facts and information. Who's the first president of the United States? What did I do yesterday? That part of the brain is actually damaged, and unfortunately, it doesn't come back as well. But the part that isn't damaged and is spared is called your habit system. That's the procedural memory. That's what we can best relate to as driving a car. You're not thinking about the rights and the lefts or how hard you're putting your foot on the accelerator. You've done that over and over, and it becomes second nature to you. That's the same thing that happens when you use these visual maps with someone with dementia. initially they'll see it for the first time, and the steps to get, to bathe or, to have that cue of that loved one who speaks to them, it may not stick for the first time, but as you start doing that on a daily basis over and over, there becomes this neuroplasticity and this memory system, the habit system, that then starts taking over, and you find that residents start doing things independently. Caregivers themselves, they will also begin to do things non-consciously, like follow those steps that they've seen over and over because those images are ingrained in the brain. So that's the clinical research that we are focused on. We have 4 peer-reviewed publications. We've done that with the Department of Veterans Affairs, with Alzheimer's research centers, with adult living communities, and also with home health companies as well. And all of them have shown that with as little as 1 month of using the MapHabit system, you can improve people's cognition, their attention, their immediate memory, the lifestyles of the activities of daily living are improved for individuals. They're able to brush their teeth on their own, or they're able to bathe with maybe just one caregiver overseeing them, whereas certain residents may have, multiple people helping at a particular time. So there's all sorts of benefits to using the MapHabit system that helps the individual residents keep their cognitive wherewithal and the happy days and years that you have with them for longer, but it really does help with that staff efficiency and really employee satisfaction, which we're all striving for in really the world that we're living in.
It's fantastic, and I've, as we've gone through this interview, I know I've been overwhelmingly complimentary, but knowing those factors, knowing something is addressing, and it is a broad perspective, but you can bring it back to the ADLs. ADLs can determine level of care. Level of care can determine cost. So that's another thing. If you look at it from the perspective that by having an ADL established, there's less guessing. I love the idea with prospective residents being able to utilize this type of program. So there is something of a foundation that begins to build. That type of communication can make for a much more honest, an honest assessment of where a resident's level of care should be. ADLs are imperative because the ADLs, once you're able to create a foundation of structure with the ADLs that works for each resident, the guessing game and kind of the unknown starts to minimize. And when it starts to minimize, you give your staff an opportunity to be able to care without as much concern, as am I doing the right thing, or what is this person doing that's working and I'm not? And it's a process. And with communities with 100 residents plus, I mean, this can be a very taxing process. So I'm really happy to hear this. I know a lot of our senior living communities listening would be very happy to know where they can actually access this application and begin.
The best place to start is to go to maphabit.com and click schedule a demo. There's a short form that you fill out, and we'll be in touch with you within 24 hours. You can email us at sales, SALES, at maphabit.com. And all that information, again, is on our website. And we'll really have a 30-minute Q&A discovery session, understand kind of where your needs and some of the areas that you're trying to improve, and then we'll work with you to maximize the MapHabit benefits as soon as you can.
Now. I mean, I think this is something that definitely should take note on a world stage. So MapHabit's doing the right thing, and Matt, you're doing the right thing, and thank you so much for coming on our show and letting us learn about this incredible application.